My name is Phil Rogers. I worked with the Agricultural Research Institute for 41 years as basically in trace element and major element research. Most of it was in relation to copper, cobalt, selenium and iodine. Deficiency of these elements, or imbalance of these elements, is a very common problem here. It's all over Ireland, north, south, east, west. Copper was our number one problem, followed by selenium, followed by iodine, followed by cobalt. So for many, many years we were looking at methods of control. How could we get a simple, cost-effective method that farmers would use to control these problems? The reality in Ireland is that very few farms have a single deficiency. They're multiple. In fact, it is very common to have all four minerals, copper, cobalt, selenium and iodine, deficient on the same farm. So we didn't want a piecemeal system where some farmers would be given copper, some cobalt, some selenium. We came up with the idea of either putting it in feed or putting it in boluses. There's a lot to be said for in-feed. In dairy cows, if they're being fed concentrate, you can put anything you want, magnesium plus trace elements in. But there's a huge role for boluses in young stock and particularly in beef cattle. Beef cattle get little or no concentrate. Giving boluses a couple of times a year would be a very practical method for the beef farmer, also for the first year animal. And one of the systems we developed then in relation to the multiple trace elements with the Animax, we came up originally with a bolus called Ionox, which was cobalt, selenium and iodine, and that was further developed by the company to include copper, which is the main problem. So all four elements are present today.
And that's now called Tresure.
Tresure, well, I'm 5 years out of the game now, but I believe it's Tresure today. Yeah.
How effective is that bolus for use in animals who are outwintered on green crops such as kale?
We checked blood samples before and after bolusing, including a control group which got no bolus. The effect on selenium is very marked. The effect on iodine is unbelievable. Iodine is up within a matter of days of going on the bolus, and it holds up for periods of up to 6 months. Now, I should say that with all minerals, dose is something you must take into account. Our target, we have target values for each of these elements. For a dairy cow, for example, we would like them to get 450 milligrams of copper a day. That's a lot of copper. Now, some of the boluses on the market will only give 100 or 150, which means you would have to give 3 boluses to get the target dose per day. In the case of the original Ionox, we would have advised 2 boluses for an adult animal, and on a severely deficient farm you might even need 3. Now obviously that puts the costs up, but for most farmers they'd get by with 2 every 5 to 6 months.
Many farmers use them on dairy cows and beef cows at drying off. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, because you have to home in on what the biggest problems are. Over here, our 2 biggest problems with iodine were stillbirths and retained placentas, followed by infertility later on during the breeding season. So giving trace elements coming up to the calving season can go a long way to cutting down calf mortality, retained placentas. And I would certainly say all cow farmers, beef and dairy, should be giving minerals before calving. Now the question is whether they should give them as boluses or whether they should give them as a high-spec mineral sprinkled on silage. National advice here is to go for the high-spec mineral, but there are farmers for whom that's not practical. A self-feed silage face, for example, is very difficult to dust properly with a loose mineral, and in that situation there's a lot to be said for boluses.
Have you seen the results of using the Tresure bolus on growing cattle and the growth rates that result from that?
We did a lot of work with copper deficiency. Of the 4 minerals, copper, cobalt, selenium and iodine, by far the most important on growth rate is copper. Now the original Ionox didn't have copper in it, but we did a lot of research with copper that showed massive weight gains where there was a molybdenum-induced deficiency. And I have no doubt that the modern bolus that includes the copper would do that job. In relation to the diagnosis of these problems, blood tests are practical and relatively cheap to do. For copper, we would do a whole blood copper. For selenium, glutathione peroxidase, which is a selenium enzyme. And for iodine, and as I said, iodine is very important in relation to retained placentas and stillbirths. The only accurate test in cattle and sheep is a test called PII, plasma inorganic iodine. The problem with this test is it's difficult. It's a 2-day test. You have to clean up the blood sample, take the plasma off, precipitate the protein, ash it, put it through a Cephalodex column. It's about 8 to 10 pounds per sample. But it is the only accurate test of iodine status. Many of the vet labs don't do this test because it requires a specialised room and specialised equipment. And instead they do the old tests, which was the thyroid hormones, T3 and T4. There is no relationship between T3 and T4 and iodine status in cattle. So I would advise farmers keep away from those tests and ask your regional lab to do the PII test for you. These tests are available in the UK. Unfortunately, they're not available in Ireland with the cutbacks. It's a great pity.